Hello everyone, and welcome back to the RimWorld Gun Empire series, where at the moment, my friends, we are currently healing up as well as cleaning up from the massive assault by the Marshal Service at the end of last episode, where we experienced a lot of damage to our squishy human bodies, but also massive damage to our defenses as well, so we're working on repairing those. Meanwhile, though, something interesting was going on. We were so focused on repairing our defenses, we didn't even notice that there was a mass infestation just outside the base. They knocked Downs unconscious, and Scott and Richard would attempt to come to her aid. They had managed to kill the large keratin-encrusted beast, but we still had to take care of their nest. The eggs would hatch swiftly as soon as we approached, and the creatures began attacking us, but using our axe, our hammer, and the old chainsaw, we would manage to take them down. I then began having some issues. As you can see, we have a lot of notices here about military cooldown, literally almost 3,000. I believe that this issue may be caused by the save file being from the previous version of RimWorld. I don't really know. Either way, though, the only solution I could really find is to delete the settlement there in the Outlands, unfortunately, and then we would actually resettle it near the base. And I would actually even get some fine footage of our mercenaries during the rehoming process, moving to their new location to set up shop. Now, our days in the Outlands in terms of battles is basically over. We're just a governing force there, and many people, our people, live there nowadays. So realistically, moving a military installation settlement from the Outlands to near the headquarters here was inevitable anyhow. After our personnel got settled into the new settlement, though, as an homage to the old Iveta settlement in the Outlands, we decided to name this one New Iveta. Felt fitting enough to me. Now then, though, on to the peace talks with the RimWorld Marshal Service. At the end of last episode, I asked you guys to let me know what you thought about actually making peace with them, and based on these two top comments from the last episode, it would seem that you all want me to make peace with them, so that's what we'll be doing. For this mission, we'll be sending out Shinichi and Commando Jr. in the helicopter. Naturally, Shinichi being our general, it makes sense that he would be the mouthpiece of the SNR Rifle Company during these meetings, and Commando Jr. here is quite charismatic. Maybe he could talk them out of a tight spot if something goes awry. Besides, taking too many people could be seen as a threat against them. Not that I expect any trouble out of them. They know good and well that they are well within the range of our nuclear capabilities. We had arrived some odd hours later, and we would end up touching down just outside of the meeting spot. The place was absolutely crawling with soldiers, and no doubt there's plenty that we can't see right off the bat hiding in the sand dunes and small hills. Rightfully so, as the leader of the entire RimWorld Marshal Service, Commander Ross, was here himself for these peace talks. Well, color me flattered. We must be much more important than I had initially thought to them. We were quick to observe their defenses just in case the shit were to hit the fan. Every soldier here appeared to be of the specialist rank, meaning we would stand little to no chance if we took them on without any backup. They had also traveled here in large armored transport vehicles, meaning that anything lesser than a large nuclear warhead, like our smaller nuclear warheads, probably wouldn't do the job. Well, I suppose let's just hope and pray that Shinichi and his silver tongue can win them over. Here goes nothing. Well, it would seem that everything went to plan just as we had hoped for. Shinichi and Ross came to an understanding, and peace has been made, with the two of them even sharing a laugh or two. Negotiations went so well, in fact, that they actually gifted us 5 Juggernaut serum that their scientist had perfected, the formula, of course, originally being from the Thromboian Union. Awful kind of them, really. I suppose they could give it to us now that we can't use it against their soldiers. Making peace with the Marshals is a massive step in the right direction, but remember, we're not going to be able to sell them plenty of weapons or ammo or anything like that until we get them going against the rebels once more. We're going to need to come up with a solution to get the two of them fighting. Also, you may notice the power going in and out, and that's because the Marshals had destroyed our advanced solar panels last episode, so we're going to have to fix those. But before that, I wanted to mention that we had finally recruited Cheeseman into our ranks. We're always more than happy to have well-trained and experienced soldiers joining our mercenaries. We sent his happy little ass straight into the armory to equip any weapons and armor that he might find useful. Now that we've made peace with the marshals, we thought it might be a good idea to load up the Eye and send Scott out in it to do a little bit of trading with them. Now you might be asking yourself as to why, since we're not going to be able to sell them any of our weapons or ammo, and the reason is because we're actually going to be selling them plenty of herbal medicine in exchange for advanced components, just as well as some other resources like steel. The reason being, well, as I had mentioned earlier, we need to try and repair our advanced solar panels, and we would need these materials to do so, so we had Shinichi go ahead and start on that little project. And yes, we do have power coming back into our batteries now and into the base, but the problem is, ever since Season 1, we've had this same issue where we'll make these power generators and then a raid happens and we lose them. We need something inside the base that is safe and secure. Allow me to present to you the solution, Fueled ASRGs, which is an advanced radioisotopic power generator. Basically, we feed a couple of these bad boys some uranium and we're good to go. Of course, it's not quite that simple. First and foremost, we have to try and research the technology, which is going to take a little bit of time, so we'll check back in on that in a moment. Speaking of research, you may have noticed, as many did in the last episode, that the Outlands actually has a highway system that we initially researched actually a pretty good while ago. As mentioned, the save file is from the previous version of RimWorld. I think we've had this research for quite a while now. I don't remember if it was in Season 1. I want to say it was at the beginning of this season, but for whatever reason, the roads just never showed up. Until now, that is. Either way, though, a big thanks to Luke Mindell8197, who brought this up in the comments of last episode so that I could remember to mention it to you guys. Then a little bit of time later, and one of the chieftains of the Thromboian Union had made us an offer. They said that they had rescued 2 of their own from an enemy jail, and they wanted us to guard them for 17 days. In exchange for doing so, they would give us some uranium, which we needed for our generators, a masterwork musical instrument, and a legendary weapon from previous wars. So, of course, we would be foolish not to accept. They had arrived sometime later, and we ended up vetting them to ensure that they truly are Union tribespeople. You can never be too careful these days. We checked out everything, down to the last freckle on their body, their accents, the weapons they carried, and anything and everything in between. Turns out they are good to go. And so we immediately put them to work doing some construction and some cooking projects for us. We don't take in freeloaders. By this point as well, our Boomalope had made a smorgasbord of chem fuel for us to haul in and use for all our vehicles, and I want to say thank you because I didn't realize just how right you guys were when you were recommending getting them instead of purchasing it. This is much more passive and much easier. I also went ahead and named all the Boomalope Oil Rig, we have Octane, and then finally we have Ortega, and these are all suggestions that you guys provided, so thank you ever so much for those. I also ended up spotting some equipment just on the outskirts of our territory, some plasma ammo, a hooded tribal hood, grenades, a shield, all kinds of stuff, but I have no idea where they came from. However, I'm assuming some type of caravan was attacked maybe by outlanders or somebody, because I noticed these items were laying there and then there was a trail of blood going through our tunnel, but no bodies. Perhaps we have some stalkers skulking around in the desert dunes. One of our nearby settlements had contacted us a little bit later saying that they had a weapon engineer of legendary status. However, he too would be needing a little bit of funding for this legendary weapon that he was supposedly creating. Of course, we tossed him 2,000 silver, no big deal. Cheeseman then ended up finishing the extensive research into fueled ASRGs. But now it was time for us to actually put that research into action by building a few of them. We would end up digging out a pretty fairly sized room just west of our storage room. We were sure to leave the walls at least 4 tiles thick, and we also built some steel doors onto it. That way if something catastrophic were to happen, we should be fairly safe. And the explosion should be contained within this room, or at least that's the idea. In the meantime, I would have Richard begin working on a cloth lab coat for Cheeseman, since he's going to be working with Downs in her lab. With an intellect like theirs together, there's no scientific discovery that we won't be able to achieve. Speaking of which, I wanted our scientific achievements of our mech suits that we had in Season 1 to be built once again. Our mech garage has been empty for far too long. The only problem is we are missing a lot of plasteel. But that's never been much of a problem for us before, as we have plenty of weapons, ammo, and even a little bit of armor that we can trade for plasteel as well as other resources that we may need. We would swiftly load all of this up into the eye and prepare it for another flight. But before we could take off, our weapons engineer that we provided funding to delivered his product and on his promise. He has produced a new type of weapon that he has appropriately named the Vector Shot. Since Graphis has been our guinea pig for body modification, exosuit frames, and basically everything else up until this point, I thought it may be best if he test out this weapon as well. An interesting piece of weapon technology to say the least. It was something like grenades, but it fired in burst, which was useful, I suppose. We would then end up having a major prison break with Michael, Sergio, and Kaj attempting to break out of their cells and leave the facility, which we couldn't allow, as I'm sure you know. It would seem that the marshals and the rebels aren't only teaming up on the battlefield, but also here in our prison. We would send in all nearby mercenaries to try and quell this rebellion, even if it meant that we had to kill some of the prisoners. Because if they were to make it outside these prison doors and get to any weapons, the results would be absolutely disastrous. But I am quite happy to report that it doesn't seem that that's going to be the case, as we have successfully stopped all of them. We'll need to take them back to their prison cells to try and ensure that they don't die either from blood loss or from infections. As you might imagine, our mechanoids like little Lefty here don't get cleaned all that often, so when he bashes you over the head with his little shotgun arm, there's a good chance of bacteria getting in the wound. I don't think Kaj will have to worry about that though. Looks like the blood loss took him out before we could try to patch him up. That's a shame. Well, that being said, even though he's making his way out to the body pile, at least we still have 3 more hostages as leverage. Now with our little prison escape artists tucked firmly back into their beds, we're going to be sending Commando Jr. out to the Union's territory to do some trading with them. And in the meantime, while he's out doing that, I also spotted this really beautiful looking iguana with a super cool pattern that I ended up finally taming after a few days of trial and error. Feel free to leave some names suggestions in the comment section down below, please and thanks. Commando Jr. had finally returned with what could only be described as a shit ton of plasteel and a few handfuls of normal steel as well. And finally, thanks to his efforts and these resources, we'll be able to build ourselves a brand new mech. This is the first time we've had one in a very long time, but I can't think of a name for it. I did, however, notice that the United Rebel Forces were requesting that we meet them in a nearby location to discuss peace talks with them, just like we had with the marshals. I'm sure you guys will let me know if we should do this with them, but this did give me an idea for the name of our mech as well. My friends, I introduce to you the mech known as Diplomacy. Fit with its new paint job, it is more than ready to stomp a few heads and start bashing in a few brains, if you know what I'm saying, along with Graphis, its operator. Thanks to his exoframe, he should be much more proficient at operating this mech suit than others. Perhaps someday we'll have an entire fleet of these that Graphis can be the captain of. All jokes aside though, these peace talks with the rebels are a very serious situation. I would like to make peace, of course, with them, but I would also like for them to be back at war with the Marshal Service or another force. I want to sell them guns and I want to make money, essentially. We're not making near as much money as we would be selling to these smaller factions like the Union and the Outlanders, of course, right? If the opportunity presents itself, I'm thinking maybe some false flag operations. Just a little something to ignite the flames of war once more. Speaking of war, it would seem that we have quite the raid coming across our border. A massive group of raiders from the Cult of the Yam. I have no doubt in my mind that this is the exact same cult that was performing rituals in the Outlands and that even killed one of our informants. Splitting him open and disemboweling him. One thing is for sure, we don't want to get taken hostage by any of these bastards. We swiftly rushed all of our mercenaries into the pillbox so that they may man our turrets and our missile launchers. I hope to make quick work out of these underwhelming forces. Though what they lack in equipment and firepower, they do make up for in numbers. It would also be the perfect opportunity for Graphis to try out the new mech suit. Perhaps these cultists just need a little bit of diplomacy. Ha 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 ha! The vast majority of them would be completely crushed by our mech. Those who were foolish enough to survive would be met with several rocket barrages as well as our machine guns. We'll make these filthy monsters beg for mercy, but there will be none to find. By this point, our defenses, as well as the mech, had taken out the majority of their forces, so we had a little firing squad come out and finish off those who remained. And just like that, we had finally achieved victory, leaving most of the surviving cultists in a pool of their own blood and or urine. Some of their surviving members, though, had decent skill sets, so I thought we might try to tend to them and maybe try to recruit them. Now, it's not exactly what you think. I do have something in mind for them. In the meantime, though, we did get plenty of mediocre-ish weapons as well as some metal blood serum from all of the cultists, so we're going to begin hauling all those into our armory so that we may begin selling them as well and making something of a profit. Okay, sure, some of their melee weapons and or weapons in general were most likely used in some type of Lovecraftian horror ritual thing, but we don't have to tell our customers that. After we had gotten everything settled though, we would take our new cultist compadres into the brainwashing rooms and leave them to their own devices, as well as whatever video is always playing at all times. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, by this point, with our production of weapons, as well as all the weapons that we keep getting from these raids and other events that are happening, we need more room in our armory to store all these. So naturally, the only acceptable solution here is for us to dig out yet another small section of the mountain right next to the armory to give it a little bit of an expansion and or upgrade. As we were doing so, one of the more prominent leaders in the Outlands had contacted us and actually had something of a proposition for us. It would seem that he actually has 2 captured prisoners from one of their enemy factions there in the Outlands. There's so many factions, it's hard to keep track, but anyhow, if we were to keep them for quite a while until his prison is ready, he would give us some gold, a heavy engine, and even some hyperweave, so of course we accepted. These prisoners are actually suffering from paralytic abasia, which essentially just means they're sick and cannot move at all, so it's kind of like cat sitting, except the cat is glued to the floor. Sounds like easy money to me. All we have to do is ensure that we feed them every so often and change out their bedpans maybe, I don't know, once a week or something, who knows. With that finally taken care of though, we could actually begin finishing up our new expansion to the armory. We would end up adding 6 new weapon lockers, 2 new weapon racks, and 2 new big shelves. And all this brand new storage space should help us out immensely. We had also finally recruited the marshal soldier known as Michael, and he would actually be the first to go into the new section of the armory and begin equipping some weapons as well as armor that we had available. I have seen you guys leaving some great comments about trying to get everyone some proper uniforms in place so that everyone has the same, standard uniform, so that's something we'll work on in the near future as well. But as for now, we have a few surgeries to perform. We would actually end up replacing Graphis' prosthetic arms with 2 brand new bionic arms, further increasing his manipulation and his badassery, if I do say so myself. We also ended up building a new type of assembly bench which will actually allow us to build some modular types of equipment like armor. And the first type of modular armor and equipment we would be working on was a little bit of armor for Graphis himself. As mentioned earlier, he is all too often our guinea pig for these new sets of armor and exoframes and everything, but I like to think of him as an innovator. As you can see, this new armor has quite a sleek design, but it also allows Graphis to carry around much larger weapons like this flamer, which I personally believe will come in quite handy during combat situations. However, this armor is not power armor, and it should be noted because that does mean that Graphis will not be able to use anything as large as, say, an autocannon. But that is okay, of course, because this is just the prototype, the beginning, if you will, into something so much greater. The type of armor that Graphis is wearing is our future, my friends. A brand new era in not only the armor of our mercenaries, but the equipment and the weapons as well. There's so much that we can do here. We are spearheading the movement towards these innovative technologies, and I am damn proud of it. Now, I will say I do like this modular armor, but I think I'm going to work around off camera, just kind of mix and match with some more of these items and see what I like as a standard uniform for our people. A bit of trial and error, of course. Either way, though, we're going to have a hard time trying to get enough resources, I would say, to make an entire uniform for every single mercenary under our control, but we'll figure it out.